Welcome, everybody. Good Shabbat. Welcome to the online church of St. Philip. Today, we continue our discussion on the book of Job on this Holy Shabbat Eve. This is part 3 of a series. So now we're at the point where Job laments ever having been born. If you've missed the first 2 classes, please go back and watch them. But a brief recap is that all the heavenly ones, the sons of God, which are angels at this point in the Hebrew Bible in the book of Job, they're all before God, Yahweh, the God of Israel. And essentially, Satan is there, the adversary. And Satan is not some demon or some devil, but he's an archangel. And he is an archangel that seems to want to test humanity. And what God says unequivocally about Job is that he is blameless, that he is pure, that he is dedicated to me, meaning that he's without sin. And usually, whenever you think of religions, whether it be Judaism, Christianity, or any other world religion, usually negative things are thought to happen when we do something bad. But God himself says, look at Job. He is a Sadiq, he is a perfect one, he's a saint, and he's blameless. Have you seen him? And Satan seems to say, well, you know, the only reason why he remains so dedicated to you is because you've blessed him. And the reason why God blessed him, of course, is because he's blameless. Whenever you follow the commandments of God or you are devotional towards God, it is thought that God blesses you. I mean, that's a basic tenet of most world religions. So this is why God had blessed Job with spiritual understanding, why he had blessed him with wealth and resources, why he blessed him with a family, all these other things, why he blessed him with good health. So the first tactic of Satan, the archangel, was to say, well, you know, if you were to just take away all of your blessings on him, your material blessings, then he'd curse you in a second. So God gives Satan permission to test Job. And he does, and basically all of Job's livestock, his resources for making a living, were killed on the spot. And Job lamented, and basically he said that God gives and God takes away, meaning he was just accepting everything as God's blessing. And then eventually all the heavenly hosts, including Satan, are before God again. And God says, hey, have you checked out the situation with Job? He's still blameless. He still loves me. He still hasn't cursed me. And then Satan said, yeah, well, why don't you hurt him down to his skin, down to his bones? Meaning, why don't you take away his health? And God said, sure, test him. I don't think that he's going to turn away from me. But I give you permission to do anything to him, but just spare his life. Don't kill him. And then Job had this terrible disease in which he had sores all over his body. And it was very, very bad because his wife was recorded as saying, why don't you just curse God and die? Meaning, why don't you turn your back on God? He's doing this terrible thing to you or allowing this terrible thing to happen to you. And you've done nothing wrong. Why don't you just curse God and die? And Job tells his wife that that's not the correct spiritual attitude to have. And now we are at this point where Job is very ill. He doesn't have a means of earning a living. And 3 of his friends came to see him, 3 of his friends. And as they were approaching from a distance, they couldn't even recognize Job because he was emaciated. He had sores all over his body. He was depleted of all energy, all optimism. And they came and they just sat in silence with him, which we discussed last week were methods of showing grief or sharing grief with people, was to visit them, to sit on the ground. In ancient Judaism, was to express your grief for somebody. So they came and they sat down on the ground and observed silence for 7 days. And they didn't say anything. They were just holding a sacred space, a compassionate space for Job to process what he was going through. So this is a normal part of grieving in Judaism, is to sit on the ground, observe silence, and not say anything. You don't immediately start saying, "Oh, you can do this," or God is going to bless you, or everything's going to be okay. Whatever kind of comforting words or scriptural verses we might decide that we want to quote, that's not what happened back then. And I think that these are good pieces of advice to follow today too. Uh, to just listen, to sit and create a space, maybe meditate and pray internally to create peace within the mind of the sufferer, and then just sit and be present and wait for him to speak. And that's what Job's friends did, is they simply waited for him to speak. And now Job does speak. And he's so sick. And before he lost all of his wealth, right? But he still had his health. So like my spiritual teacher says, you could lose $1 million and there's no harm in that. You could make another $1 million, right? But you can't get back one lost second. That's the other end to her teaching, which doesn't really apply to today. But Job probably figured, I have my health. Yes, I lost things, but I can always earn more money, or I could always breed more animals, or do whatever it is that he did to earn money back then. But now he's lost his health. So he's lost his health. And when you lose your health, it's very hard to pray. It's very hard to meditate. It's very hard to do anything. And it seems that he was close to death, if we are to believe what his wife said in the last class. So that's what brings us to today. He doesn't have any energy to seek God, to enjoy his life, to create livelihood. Everything is falling apart around him and he doesn't know what to do. And now we're at the point in Job 3:3-4, where Job just laments. He wishes he was never born. This is so terrible. I wish I was never born. And these dialogues that begin now and that we talk about this week and probably for the next 2 weeks. This week, one friend, Eliphas, gives advice to Job, and then his two other friends, the next 2 Fridays, will give pieces of advice to Job. And these are all very poetically worded. They're very long, flowery sentences about grief and about dealing with grief. And that's why Job is part of the poetical works of the wisdom tradition of Judaism. I just make select verses. I do encourage each of you to go and open up your Bible and read the full sections from which these verses are extracted. So let's look at the select verses to get the lesson of the day. Job 3:3-4. After this, losing his livelihood and losing his health to the point of death, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He didn't curse God, he cursed the day of his birth. There's a difference. Job said, "Let the day perish in which I was born, and the night that said, a man child is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, or light shine on it." So here Job is just lamenting. He's so depressed. He's so torn apart by what's happened, seemingly without any reason, that he said it would have just been better. He's suffering so much mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, that he just wished that he had never been born. And now, because Job has started to speak in this ritual of sitting on the ground in silence for 7 days, because Job has spoken, Eliphaz takes his turn, one of the 3 sage friends of Job. And he tries to awaken Job's spiritual courage to move forward. In Job 4:3-5, Eliphaz says, "See, you have instructed many. You have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have supported those who are stumbling, and you have made firm the feeble knees. But now it has come to you, and you are impatient. It touches you, and you are dismayed." Eliphaz says some really deep spiritual wisdom, and this really touched my heart today. It's true that, imagine your next door neighbor that her wife dies, his wife dies, pardon me. And she's grieving, he's grieving that the spouse has died, lamenting, how will I ever get it back? And then you, who are a deep friend, possibly a spiritual friend, says to the man, oh, well, you know, her soul is eternal. Everything will be okay. Remember God's promise. Remember this. And you start quoting all these things, you know, the grief, it'll get better over time. And grief doesn't always get better over time. It doesn't. Sometimes, even when grief seems to subside, weeks, months, or years later, it comes up like it was the same day that you lost somebody. I lost my grandmother when I was in the second grade on December 17th, 1987, I believe was the date, either the 15th or the 17th. And still some days I think about her and tears come to my eyes. And that was like a long time ago. I was like 8 years old and now I'm 40 something, right? And still the pain of that loss touches my heart and makes it very vulnerable. But this is what people do, especially spiritual people, is that they counsel people to be strong during difficult times. You know, get your ground up underneath of you, stabilize yourself. All of this will pass, right? God is with you. God is going to take care of your loved one that died. This, that, and the next. The soul is immortal. Now they're in heaven. None of this stuff, even if it's true, makes the grieving person feel any better, right? So Eliphas is pointing this reality out. He's saying, you know, you have comforted so many people with wisdom, with scriptural verses, but yet when suffering comes to you, you're impatient and say, oh, I just want to die. I wish I'd never been born. When it touches you, you're dismayed, you're distraught. But when it touches somebody else, oh, this is God's will, right? It'll pass. So Eliphas is pointing out, I don't think that Eliphas is trying to be mean to Job. And I don't think that he's saying Job is not a sage, because God himself said that he's blameless and that he's a sage. But Eliphas is trying to comfort Job with wisdom and help him to retain his mental balance. He's saying, you know, you've instructed so many people to be strong and to be firm. Now you need to give yourself that own advice. You need to have patience. You need to trust in God. Everything will be okay. This too can pass. Remember all the wisdom you shared with all of us and with so many other people. Embody and use that wisdom now. That's what Eliphas is telling Job. Eliphas asks if any human is truly innocent, right? Because the whole idea here is that why do good people suffer for no reason? That's the spiritual question that all of the book of Job seeks to answer. God himself said that Job is blameless, meaning that he doesn't sin. But yet, Job is suffering greatly. His livelihood was cut off, his health was destroyed, he's almost dead, but he's blameless. He hasn't committed any sin. And Eliphas, also being a sage himself, he asks if any human really is truly innocent, right? Are any of us perfect, is what he's saying. Even those that follow the Bible to a T or do all the 10 commandments or whatever it is that we follow, you follow your spiritual teachers' teachings and injunctions perfectly with sparkling obedience, right? In Job 4, 7 through 8, in verse 17, also Eliphas says this to Job, think now, who that was innocent ever perished? Or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. So two kind of things are happening here. Eliphas is saying, think now, who that was innocent ever perished? Meaning, if you're truly innocent, Job, you're not going to die, so don't wish death on yourself. Where were the upright cut off? Cut off is another way of saying killed, right? So if you're upright and you're innocent, even if you're going through bad times, it won't be your end, you know? And then he says, those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. But Job doesn't fall into that category, does he? So Eliphas is kind of bringing up this idea, is anybody ever truly blameless before God? And he speaks in the next verse that I have underlined. Eliphas said that he had a vision of an angel, and he could hear an angel saying the following questions, which are rhetorical questions. Can mortals be righteous before God? Can human beings be pure before their maker? So, in other words, it's kind of mimicking things that Jesus said before. In Mark, they tell Jesus that he's so good, and Jesus rebukes them and says, nobody but God the Father is good. I am not good. Only God is good. Only God is holy. And that's kind of what's being taught here in the Hebrew Testament in Job. It's what Eliphas is saying, or what Eliphas says the angel told him. So, can mortals be righteous before God? Because none but God is good, according to Mar Yeshua, the Master Jesus. Can human beings be pure before their maker? So even if you're good by human standards, before God, we're nothing, right? Whatever meager purity we've been able to attain along our spiritual journey, that pales in comparison to divine light. So it's saying essentially, because we're so impure, we deserve troubles here and there. And this is the line of thinking that Eliphas is sharing with Job to try to comfort him. Because Job is beginning to wonder, and when you read the full poetry, he'll say that I did nothing wrong. Why am I experiencing this? And that's why Eliphas is saying that even the best of humans is not righteous before the righteousness of God. The most pure of humans, which Job was at that time, they're not even close to being pure in the face of God. So for these reasons, we deserve what comes to us. We should accept the good as blessings of God and the bad as blessings of God. This is the comfort that Eliphas is giving to Job. And then now Eliphas gives his advice to Job. What should you do in this bad situation? And this is the advice to all people when things go wrong and you're saying, God, why is this happening to me? Why did I lose my job? Why did I lose my wife? Why did my child die? When you just can't reconcile what's happening in your life and the suffering that you're experiencing. This is what Eliphas advises to Job in Job 5:8-9. As for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause. He does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number. So here Eliphas is saying, look at all the miracles that God has done throughout Jewish history. They're marvelous things without number. And if God is capable of all those miracles, you should seek him in prayer and meditation. You should tell him what you're going through and how you're feeling, and ask him to help you to get through it. If he was able to create all these miracles in history, why can't he create a miracle for you and solve these issues for you? This is what Eliphas asks him to do. My spiritual master always says that when things get bad, just cling on to the feet of God and don't let go. In other words, a lot of people, whenever they have difficulties in life, they turn away from God. They feel betrayed by God. They feel God is punishing them, or that God doesn't care about them. And they'll turn away from God in grief. I did it. Whenever my grandmother died and I was in the second grade, I prayed to God and I said, "You don't exist anymore. You're done to me. You've hurt me so badly by allowing my grandmother to be taken away. I will never pray to you again. I will never do anything." And now I'm a priest. So my promise to God didn't work quite so well. But I did turn away from God, and a lot of people turn away from God in their grief. So here, Eliphaz is telling Job, don't turn away from God. Don't give up. Seek him. Tell him what you're going through and expect a miracle to happen. Expect him to support you. The outcome might not be what you want, but expect results when you pray to God and ask for his help when you're suffering. And then Job ends and we get our major teaching for the day. I mean, there's several really great teachings that just came from Eliphaz, right? But now we get what Job gets from this conversation with his dear friend Eliphaz. What he decides to do is said now. And this is an attitude that we should all have. Because he's suffering greatly, he could very easily say, "God, why are you doing this? I'm turning away from you. I'm done with you. I've been a sage all of my life. I've done good all of my life, and look what you're allowing to happen." He doesn't say that at all. He actually takes Eliphaz's advice to heart. And this is what Job says in Job 6, 8 through 10, also verse 24. Job says, "Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would grant my desire, that it would please God to crush me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. This would be my consolation. I would even exult in unrelenting pain, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. Teach me, and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have gone wrong." So this is what he's saying to God before his sage friends and in response to Eliphaz. He said, "I just wish that God would grant me one request, that he would just end my life." He said, "I would even exult in unrelenting pain before I speak against God." So he's saying that he was willing to accept any kind of torture or serious disease that would cause even more pain than what he's experiencing already. He said, "Because I will not deny the words of the Holy One. I will not go against God's teaching. I will not go against God." And then the last verse, verse 24, he says, "Teach me." And he's speaking directly to God. "Teach me, God, and I will be silent. Make me understand how I've gone wrong." This is the attitude we should take when we're suffering or when things go wrong in life. We shouldn't blame God. We shouldn't curse God. We should be patient. And in our prayers, we should ask God for help for what we're going through, that what we're going through will be resolved in a way that benefits everybody involved. And you should ask God to teach your soul. I will be silent. I'm not going to try to bribe God, yell at God, coax God, convince God, anything. I'm going to be silent. And God, teach me. Make me understand how I've gone wrong. And again, the basis for this is that Job doesn't understand what he's done wrong. It's not something that's obvious to him that he has done some sin or not done some certain commandment from Torah. So he wants God to let him know how he's gone wrong and how such mistakes have resulted in this current situation, because he's not aware that Satan is testing him yet, right? He's just simply aware that everything is falling apart. And from his Jewish upbringing, he understands that sin, the results of sin, are poverty, sickness, etc., which is exactly what he's experiencing at this point. So he wants to know how he went wrong, even if it was subtle. Were my intentions not pure whenever I fulfilled the commandment or whenever I prayed? What was the shortcoming in myself, in my rituals, in my prayers, and my meditations that resulted in this dire situation? So again, instead of the overall lesson is that when things go bad, don't blame God, don't bribe God. Pray to God. Tell him your situation and then be silent. And before you're silent, say, teach me, help me to understand, awaken my mind, illumine my soul, and make me understand how I've gone wrong, what I can do better, what I can do to resolve this situation, what I could do to reestablish my health or this relationship or whatever else it is that we have lost. And this is the applicable modern day understanding of Job up to this point. Second cup of blessing. Heavenly Father, divine Mother of the universe, I bow down before you. Thank you for bringing us all together here today or online. Those that listen to this, please bless them. Please help us to always understand that the only one that is good is you, that there's always room for improvement. When things go bad, let us draw closer to you, love you more deeply, trust in you more greatly. May we always ask you to help us and to guide us, but let your will be done, as Master Jesus said. Let us be silent, and through soul intuition, may we always receive what we can do better or what we can do to resolve the troubles we're going through. Help us to always have solution consciousness and not blame consciousness. Not blame upon others, not blame upon you, but may we always seek to find the answers to our problems within our soul. Amen, amen, amen. Thank you, everybody, for coming and listening to this talk and for celebrating Shabbat with me. I'll see you next Friday. Good Shabbats. God bless.